If you're like me, you've probably noticed that over the last number of years, the phrase live-action remake has become something of a hot-button issue. And to some extent, I can understand why there's both love and hate for the recreation of these beloved childhood stories. But up front, I want to make something clear. When I say live-action isn't an upgrade, I'm not suggesting that animation is inherently superior to live-action. In fact, it's quite the opposite. What I mean is that one isn't inherently better than the other. Each medium offers something the other can't, adding value to what are known as the four cornerstones of storytelling in their own unique ways. These four cornerstones are known as plot, setting, theme, and character. And within each individual story ever told, these are prioritized differently. For instance, Attack on Titan has a strong focus on plot and setting, and while character isn't ignored, it receives less focus than the plot consistency and world building within the comic. Understanding this is important because, depending on the genre or nature of a story being told, the visual representation of the events on screen can either serve to enhance, or in some cases take away from the final product if the wrong property is adapted. In other words, 2D animation, CGI, and live action offer different strengths and weaknesses to a story, which means you need to be extremely careful when deciding what animated property receives a live action adaptation or vice versa. However, lately, as many of you might have noticed, for better or worse, we are deep in the throes of a Disney remake renaissance. Indiscriminately, the mouse seems to be throwing live action remakes of beloved franchises left, right, and center, seemingly without regard for whether or not it translates well into the format at all, with 2019 already having received 3 with 2 more on the way before the year ends. But why do people have a problem with this? Well, it seems to be the case that classic films are being chosen not because they'd benefit from the live-action format, but because they're popular. As I said, different stories ask for different things from its visuals, and if the story that's being told is focusing on aspects that are not enhanced by the visuals, you get something like this.
No, God!
Now, this is not to suggest that live-action remakes or reimaginings are a bad idea. In fact, I think with the right properties, they are a great idea and have a chance at being superior to the originals if chosen for the right reasons and done correctly. As I said, the 4 major components for any story are a unique combination of plot, setting, theme, and character. If an animated feature deals with a gritty, realistic world of human characters, it stands to reason a live-action adaptation could add to these areas of the film in ways animation could not. However, there is a massive problem. A stigma that animation hasn't been able to shake in decades. At this moment in time, the mainstream belief is that live action is an objective improvement, higher quality, and for all ages. All the while, the unique advantages animation provides us with are being ignored or forgotten, simply cast aside as something for children. Let's talk about The Lion King. The staggering level of detail and perfection that these photorealistic animals march, chat, and sing across a screen with is nothing short of incredible. So much so, you'd be forgiven for forgetting that these are actually CGI models generated on a computer. It's abundantly clear that an absurd amount of time, effort, and skill went into making this animated world as true to the real world as possible, which makes what I'm about to say all the more difficult. The visuals don't communicate effectively. And I think the creator of Toy Story said it best.
One of my mentors, whose work really always inspired me, was Chuck Jones, who was a great Warner Brothers cartoon director. He always said, John, great animation, you should turn the sound off and still be able to tell what's going on.
You can pick any scene at random from the original Lion King film, and without context, you can understand what the characters are feeling and even what their motivations are. For instance, if you take images from this scene in the original film and tried to decipher what the emotions and motivations behind the characters were, you'd find it's remarkably easy. This isn't by accident. The purpose of the visuals behind any story is to enhance the communication of the narrative. Because of this, it's possible to watch the original Lion King without sound and still understand what's going on. However, if that same approach was taken with the live-action film, you'll find that you receive a tiny fraction of the information in comparison. In saying that, I realize it might prompt some of you to say, what does it matter if they're communicating visually? They're talking. I get the information that way. In saying this, you have made an argument for radio. If the visuals don't matter, why not rip some vaguely similar footage from a bunch of wildlife documentaries and call it a day? I'll tell you why. Because more information is communicated through visuals than through dialogue. And the best example of that is this, where the staggering up a hill, the inclusion of a knowing smile, and the gentle glide of a balloon towards a hospital bed can take you through a whirlwind of emotions unlike anything dialogue can grant you in that time. If you don't understand what visual storytelling is, I implore you to watch Disney Pixar's Up. Within the first 15 minutes, you will have an intimate understanding of what it is and why it's important. Now, don't get me wrong, live-action films can and have famously told their stories without words, but as we continue to push the limits of CGI into the realm of photorealism, we're starting to lose sight of what the visuals of a film are actually there for. To communicate emotion, to communicate motive, to tell a story. And I think no other live-action remake better embodies that mistake than The Lion King. In order to overcompensate for its lack of expression, the character models in The Lion King are forced to express themselves through body language. Funnily enough, for the exact same reasons the Power Rangers overact when they're in their ranger suits, because their faces cannot be seen. Additionally, in scenes that would utilize an abundance of color to emphasize the fantastical imagination and naivety of a character's youth, this photorealistic aesthetic is forced to downplay these moments in an effort to make it more uniform with the rest of the production. The result is something much less visually striking and interesting, and doesn't serve the character and setting as effectively as the animated Lion King did. The more I analyze this film's use of CGI photorealism, the more it makes me realize that it's less an effective storytelling device and more so an impressive tech demonstration. Something that will have people say, "Man, that looks gorgeous!" And it is gorgeous and impressive and all the other things people have been saying online about it, but it's not a good storytelling device, exhausting everything it has to offer in the first act's admittedly gorgeous opening sequence. However, there is one place where traditional 2D animation is still king, and unlike anywhere else, is not stigmatized as simply children's entertainment. Japan. Unlike the United States and Hollywood, the Japanese anime industry has wall-to-wall variation in its animated products. And at this point, I think it's safe to say that there's nothing they won't animate. Unlike the West, where they relegate anime to its own genre, in the East, anime covers anything and everything from children's entertainment to tragic war stories to epic romances spanning lifetimes and action-adventure thrill rides. Anime as a concept and product is a multi-billion-dollar industry, providing thousands of people with work in Japan and entertainment across the world. Because nowhere else will you see an animated love story of this quality in 2019 that is meant for adults. Nowhere else will you get animated horror films and TV shows. This is a corner of the market that the West is ignoring, and for better or worse, Japan is capitalizing on it in the most effective of ways. This, however, does not mean that they are free from the bad live-action remake plague. Not by a long shot. I think at this point it's important to reiterate that there can be bad animated TV shows and movies, the same way there can be bad live-action TV shows and movies. It all boils down to the artistic integrity of the product. If something is made exclusively because it's a cash grab, the likelihood of there being a great idea behind it is significantly lessened. And while there have been some awful live-action adaptations of some of my favorite series, I still don't think that live-action adaptations are inherently a bad idea if executed correctly. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that there are things animation can offer a product that no other medium can. The same can be said for live action. For instance, despite its incredibly tone-deaf and incomprehensible execution, Netflix, either by design or by chance, was onto something when they attempted to adapt Death Note into a live-action format. The themes, setting, plot, and characters of Death Note don't necessarily depend on animation for their expression and success. It's a series that's driven by plot and themes, which means Death Note, if handled correctly, could stand to be made all the more effective if shown in reality. Every death, every chase, every sudden realization stands to be made all the more real and intense if faithfully adapted into live action. As long as the themes, characters, and settings of a given property doesn't heavily rely on animation to communicate its information, there exists the possibility of an effective live action remake. J.J. Abrams is currently working on a live action adaptation of the Japanese smash hit Your Name right now, and if handled correctly, it could work extremely well. The horror and emotion of Attack on Titan can make an effective transition to live action if tackled correctly also, and the list goes on. But that's not to say that all properties can. Dragon Ball has famously been the victim of bad live-action adaptations, one that entirely missed the point of the series. However, even if handled with better care, I'm not convinced that a live-action adaptation would enhance the product overall. The characters and personalities of Dragon Ball express themselves in extreme ways by making use of its animated format, and I'm still not convinced that live-action would create more visually interesting fight sequences in the style of Dragon Ball. Essentially, I think Dragon Ball stands to lose more by injecting realism into its story than it stands to gain. Our imaginations know no limits. New innovative ways of telling stories are being created all the time. And in this fast-paced world where we are amazed and looking forward to the opportunities and possibilities the future holds, I think it's important to not cast aside what once was. Animation offers possibilities no other medium can. It can bring you into the mind of a young kid, the spirit of a warrior, and the body of your favorite creature. But as years pass by, it seems to be fading into the background more and more. And so as future technologies are being invented and upgraded by the day, it's important to not mistake the past as inferior. Only in understanding and appreciating that every medium offers something unique to its design will film studios be equipped to make the educated decisions necessary to deliver the stories that capture our imaginations. Only then will these questionable decisions become a thing of the past, and only then will our friends, families, and children continue to be transported to infinity and beyond. Thanks for watching.